Ladies and gentlemen, let us all rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 47th session of the Senate and the first regular session of the 18th Congress is hereby called to order. Let us bow our heads and pause for a minute of silent prayer. Thank you. The Secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members, the Honorable Senators Angara, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, De La Rosa, Drilon, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Ontiveros, Lacson, Lapid, Marcos, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Tolentino, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
With 17 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense the reading of the Journal of the 46th session, Monday, January 27, 2020, and consider the same as approved. So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none, journal is approved.
Mr. President, we have several guests with us today. We have from the City of Alaminos, Pangasinan, Mayor Art Brian Celeste is in the gallery. And we also have with us from Agusan del Sur, Governor Santiago Cane Jr., and he's the governor of Agusan del Sur, together with Mayor Corvera of San Luis Agusan del Sur, Mayor Mampatilan of Esperanza Agusan del Sur, Mayor Silvia Elorde of Bumawan Agusan del Sur, Mayor Mirna Mondihar of Varuela Agusan del Sur, Mayor Lorife Magadan Otaza of Loreto Agusan del Sur, Mayor Simon Cagiat of San Josefa, Agusan del Sur, and Mayor Frederick Meliana of Prosperidad, Agusan del Sur. These are my neighbors, Mr. President, Bukidnon. We share the same boundary with this beautiful province of Agusan del Sur.
All right, we welcome all our friends from Agusan del Sur to the Senate this afternoon. Thank you for the visit.
Ayan na pala, Mr. President. They're entering the guest area from Agusan del Sur. Mayong hapon kanilang tanan, mga Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for the reference of business. With the
The
permission.
Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Reference of business, bills on first reading, Senate number 1297, entitled An Act Establishing a Diagnostic Laboratory for Livestock-Related Diseases in every province where the livestock industry is a major economic activity, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Lapid.
Referred to the Committees on Agriculture and Finance.
Senate number 1298, an act providing for the designation of community shelters in times of natural disasters, calamities, and other emergencies, introduced by Senator Lapid.
Referred to the Committees on Urban Planning and Local Government.
Senate number 1299, an act exempting qualified overseas Filipino workers, OFWs, from the coverage of Republic Act number 10912, otherwise known as the Continuing Professional Development Act of 2016, introduced by Senator Lapid.
Referred to the Committee on Civil Service.
Resolutions. PS Resolution Number 298, entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committees to Conduct an Inquiry on the Total Damage of the Taal Volcano Eruption in order to assess the total financial requirements for the aid, relief, resettlement, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and livelihood support to communities adversely affected by the natural catastrophe, introduced by Senator Angara.
Referred to Committees on National Defense and Finance.
PS Resolution Number 299, resolution expressing the sense of the Senate that the validity and implementation of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, between the Republic of the Philippines and the United States of America be urgently reviewed, introduced by Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
PS Resolution Number 300, entitled Resolution Urging the Appropriate Senate Committee to Conduct an Inquiry in Aid of Legislation into the Continued Incapacity of the Sugar Regulatory Administration, SRA, in strengthening the sugar industry, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committee on Agriculture. We have additional reference to business.
Additional reference of business resolution, PS Resolution Number 301, entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committees to Conduct an Inquiry on the Preparedness of the Concerned Government Agencies, particularly the Department of Health, DOH, in the event that the novel coronavirus 2019 NCOV spread in the Philippines and become an epidemic, with the end in view of updating and informing the Senate of the Philippines and the general public, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
Referred to the Committee on Health. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I just ask for 1 minute suspension to confer with the interpellators of the measure, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Before we tackle official business of the day, we'd like to recognize also students from Manila Adventist College School of Law and Jurisprudence that are here with us this afternoon.
All right, welcome to the Senate.
So, Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1083 and the Committee Report number 9. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
May we recognize the sponsor, Senator Panfilo M. Lacson, and to interpolate the distinguished former Senate President, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
The gentleman from Cavite and the gentleman from Mindanao are recognized. Senator Ping Lacson, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the honorable sponsor of this representation, I'd just like to ask some clarificatory questions about the measure pending.
On this sixth day of interpellations, Mr. President, is still willing and able.
Still, huh?
Well, important measures, Your Honor, are really subjected to intensive and extensive examination. So karangalan ng isang panukala na tawagin siyang walang kamatayang panukala. Kasi talagang importante po ito. Mr. President, I noticed that this is an act to amend an existing law, the Human Security Act. And yet I noticed that we amended the title from because if this measure becomes law, it will now no longer be the Human Security Act, it will now be the Anti-Terrorism Act. And then we also amended the entire definition of before it was called in the existing law terrorism. Now we now call this terrorist acts, but the substance we overhauled. So uh, although the measure is entitled as an amendment, practically, are we really overhauling the Human Security Act with the effect of actually repealing the Human Security Act and enacting an entirely new law, which we will now call the Terrorism Act, the Anti-Terrorism Act?
The gentleman, Mr. President, is correct in his observation that you're actually overhauling and effectively repealing the Human Security Act. As a matter of fact, there's a suggestion, although this will be brought up during the period of amendments, that we just insert the existing provisions under the Human Security Act and rename the bill when it's enacted into law, once it's enacted into law, as the Terrorism Act of 2020, if you may.
So what will happen, Mr. President, during the period of amendments, we will also overhaul this measure?
That is correct, Mr. President. But we will insert the provisions, existing provisions under RA 9732. So it will
yes.
not be known anymore as suggested by the distinguished minority leader, no? It will not be known anymore as RA 9732 as amended by whatever RA number this will be known
Yes, I get
after we pass this.
Yes, I get it. So what we will do is we will write the new concepts, and then the uncontested sections of the existing law you will insert in their
Will be
proper
inserted.
places.
That is
I
correct,
get
Mr.
it,
President.
That would be easier.
And that's not without reason, Mr. President. We found out during committee hearings that human security is too broad a concept. No? Masyadong broad po ito eh. Ang laki na nakocover. And we want to focus on terrorism. So that's one of the reasons why we decided to rename the title of the existing law.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, so if the purpose of the measure now is to focus on fighting terrorism, all the more that we have to define carefully, properly, and clearly that very specific purpose of the law, which is terrorism, to
That
fight
is correct,
terrorism. Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
President.
In existing law, Mr. President, there is a joint oversight committee, as I understand. Was this ever convened, and what were the findings of this committee? Kailan ba ito napasa?
Yes, there is a joint oversight. There's an oversight committee, but it has never been convened, Mr. President.
So, yeah, so unfortunately, we do not have with us information or data from the Joint Oversight Committee on how the law has been implemented, the achievements of the existing law, the difficulties in implementing the existing law. There is no...
That will be taken care of by the oversight function of Congress, and the Anti-Terrorism Council will regularly review
Okay, so...
and find out the effectiveness of this act, Mr. President.
Yes, but of the, I want to refer to the existing act. So, because right now we have this law, which is called the Human Security Act, and we are overhauling it, completely changing its face, its character, its focus. So there must be a reason why we are doing this. What has been the feedback about the implementation of the Human Security Act? Has it been a dead letter law, or?
Yeah, we actually the proposal came from the Anti-Terrorism Council, Mr. President. But we also we endeavored to study the different anti-terrorism or terrorism acts or laws of the different countries. So we came up with this new definition of under the proposed measure, Mr. President. There's another session, Mr. President. There's another session going on the other side of the aisle.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The other session is adjourned.
So, yeah. Okay, so correct me, Mr. President, if my understanding is misplaced. No? So when we looked at the trend in other countries, because as I think I heard in the previous interpellation that there are more than 100 definitions of the concept of
109, at least
109
109.
for terrorism. So I'm assuming these are legal definitions, so there are at least 109 different laws, maybe in 109 different jurisdictions.
Not
So-
necessarily.
Not necessarily,
Our
okay.
reference is the Wikipedia, Mr. President.
But anyway, many definitions. So meaning to say, that, when the council looked at the trend worldwide, they saw that the trend was to focus specifically on terrorism.
Yes, taking into consideration three elements, no? Yung acts, intent, at saka yung safeguards. Doon na lang
So,
tayo nag-compress, nag-focus sa
act,
tatlong
Act, intent, and safeguards.
safeguards.
Are these main categories also present in the anti-terrorism laws of the countries which the council
That is our
studied?
observation, Mr. President.
Acts, intent, safeguard. Okay. So, but why cannot we live with the current Human Security Act? Why the need to overhaul it?
We want to be compliant with the existing international standards, Mr. President, and state obligations.
Was there something wrong with our definition of terrorism in the Human Security Act?
Very wrong, Mr. President. That's the reason why there's only one conviction so far after so many years, because we passed the Human Security Act in 2007. It's now 2020, and so far there's only one conviction. And the difficulty, because we also invited as one of our resource persons the judge himself, who rendered that guilt verdict, ano. Ang sabi niya, napakahirap talaga because of the predicate crimes. And besides, the law enforcement agencies themselves refuse to file violations or to file cases against persons for violation of the Human Security Act, because there's a sort of Damocles hanging over their heads. Because if the respondents are acquitted, then they are mandated under the law, the existing law, to pay a fine of 500,000 pesos per day. So sa halip na mag-file po sila ng violation ng Human Security Act, nagpa-file na lang sila ng multiple murder or whatever other offenses covered by the revised penal code, Mr. President.
So, as I understand it, Mr. President, the record of the Human Security Act is one conviction,
One conviction,
okay.
one prescription.
one proscription. Okay, may we know which organization
Abu Sayyaf.
was? Abu Sayyaf.
And it took
Okay.
them at least 7 years
But
after
on
the
the-
passage.
But on the other side of the coin, Mr. President, there is no record of any wrongful detention or imprisonment.
There will always be, I don't have the records, no data, Mr. President, but I assume that for every apprehension or every arrest, all the arrests made by law enforcement agencies, meron talagang lalabas at lalabas na pwedeng wrongful detention. But in reference, if you are referring to that provision of fine, of providing for a fine of 500,000 pesos, then wala namang naparusahan ng ganon.
Among the law enforcers. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. President. Because they refuse to file nga under this act.
So,
And our colleague here, who just retired from the PNP, will attest to that.
so maybe the Human Security Act was only invoked once, and there was one conviction. There's a 100% batting average.
100% conviction rate.
Yes, yes. conviction rate,
Probably,
yes.
Mr. President.
So, okay. But, Mr. President, yes,
So,
yes, sir.
added information. According to the Anti-Terrorism Council, meron mga cases na dismiss. And now, those arrested are claiming
Damages.
for damages. Yung invoking that provision of 500,000 pesos fine.
In the measure we are discussing, Mr. President, we are going to delete the sections providing for this
500,000
500,000
Definitely,
damage.
Mr. President.
So, and this is supposed to be a safeguard. So what safeguard are we now going to replace this with?
Imprisonment. Medyo matagal
Of
yung
the
imprisonment.
law enforcer?
Of the law enforcer. Yun lang sa arbitrary detention. At saka tinaasan po natin yung penalty. In-increase natin up to 20 years, no? 12 and 1 day to 20 years. Yung,
So
marami pa safeguards. Na-retain po
Yes.
yung mga safeguards. But we did not include anymore. We're not including anymore the 500,000 pesos fine.
But if you look at the, let's say, victim of a wrongful application of the Anti-Terrorism Act, he was really wrongfully, without basis,
I don't know the
detained.
details.
Is there any mechanism to compensate that person for lost income, the suffering, the moral damages
Sa
during
damages po, pwedeng pumasok doon.
But we do not recognize it in the current measure. He will have to seek it from the.
Well,
he
we'd
will have
rather-
to base his cause of action from the civil code or some
We'd
other.
rather leave it to the court, Mr. President. There's another
There's
law
a
that
victims
covers it.
compensation fund, but if I remember correctly, there's a ceiling. I think it's 10,000 pesos total amount. Yeah, that can be given. So, okay, but for as long as we can make that clear, that although the new law deletes the section providing for an amount of damages per day, it does not mean that the person aggrieved by a wrongful implementation of the law
Cannot claim.
has no more recourse to claim for damages. He can still claim for damages.
Of course, Mr.
If we can
President.
make that very clear. Okay. If the sponsor is open, if this representation can come up with wording, although not in the amount of 500,000, is the sponsor open to accommodating such a section in the measure?
Are you intending to put an amount again, but not 500,000 pesos? Baka maging arbitrary na naman po, Mr. President. Anyway, there's another law that covers compensation or to cover for damages, Mr. President.
We will take a look into that other law, Mr. President, if it should it be sufficient.
May kasama po itong perpetual disqualification from public office, kung public officer yung involved.
The person. Yes, but that is the deterrent from the point of view of the law enforcer from abusing his powers under the law.
Hindi compensatory.
But I'm looking at the compensation for the
Compensation.
victim of the abuse. So.
At the proper time, let's
Yes,
talk
Mr.
about it,
President.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, I noticed that Section 2 of the measure amends Section 2 of the existing law and deletes the last two paragraphs of Section 2, Declaration of Policy. Are these two paragraphs no longer meaningful or relevant, or are they
They're still relevant, Mr. President.
are they obstacles to better law enforcement?
Ang talagang objective lang is to focus on terrorism. How to fight terrorism, Mr. President. Anyway, lahat ng human rights safeguards present dito sa proposed measure. Retained naman po yan lahat doon sa mga
Pero
succeeding
nakasama
provisions.
po ba itong last two paragraphs sa Declaration of Policy? Kasi
And dinalit na po natin.
yung third paragraph, the state recognizes that the fight against terrorism. So it's about terrorism. So why are we deleting if they're not doing any damage? Why cannot we just leave them there?
Well, our objective is just to focus on terrorism. Pero lahat naman ng safeguards, if you go through the different provisions under the different paragraphs, andyan po, retained lahat. Dinagdagan pa po natin, Mr. President. Like yung...
Will retaining the last two paragraphs of Section 2 destroy the new intent and new emphasis or focus of the measure?
Hindi naman po, pero wala naman problema. We just want to focus on terrorism. No? Kaya namin we decided to delete.
Yeah, but yes, Mr. President, the third paragraph, which is recommended for deletion, talks about terrorism.
Well, no problem, Mr.
Okay,
President. Yeah.
So, yes, at least when the time comes, maybe the motion is not to delete.
Not to delete?
Yes, to delete. Unless these are responsible for the non-invocation of this law, of the Human Security Act. Hindi
No,
naman
as I
siguro.
said,
Hindi naman
if
siguro.
you go through the rest of the provisions, nandun naman lahat yung human rights safeguards, Mr. President.
In the definition of terms, Mr. President, have we addressed the concern raised by the minority leader about foreign terrorists? Okay na po ba ito? We will amend this at the proper
Sorry,
time.
Mr. President.
The foreign terrorists, sir, the definition of foreign terrorist.
Yeah, it's there, Mr. President.
Is there already an agreement at a proper time that we will amend the foreign terrorist?
No, there's
definition?
no agreement, Mr. President.
Because if we are to go to the section on foreign terrorist, can a Filipino be considered a foreign terrorist?
Well, a foreign terrorist should be a foreigner, Mr.
Yes,
President.
precisely, Mr. President.
But a Filipino who has hatched a plan to commit a terrorist act in the Philippines or has committed terrorist acts abroad, once he comes back to the Philippines, may be covered under this act, Mr. President.
Yes, but is he going to be under Section 10, a foreign terrorist?
Well, a Filipino cannot be a foreign terrorist,
Yes, sir.
Mr. President.
But precisely because as written, if I look at Section 10, paragraph C, that could be a Filipino
Section 10.
for any person residing abroad.
Well, a Filipino who has become a resident abroad may be categorized as a foreigner, Mr. President, if he has lost his Filipino citizenship.
Okay.
If by origin he's a Filipino, but he has...
Not necessarily because residing is the word. That's why if maybe during the amendment, if we can clarify what a foreign terrorist is. And may we know, Mr. President, where we got this? This is a new section, no? This is a new concept, Mr. President.
This is
right?
a new
Not in the
section.
human. Did we get this from any model law that we
Yes, Mr.
examined?
President.
Which law?
It's being
Mr.
practiced in
Which-
other countries.
Which law, Mr. President? Which
United
country?
States. Ang basis po dito sa foreign terrorist, definition ng foreign terrorist fighters, UN Security Council Resolution 2178. This was adopted in 2014. It says, calls upon all member states in accordance with their obligations under international law to cooperate in efforts to address the threat posed by foreign terrorist fighters, including by preventing the radicalization to terrorism and recruitment of foreign terrorist fighters, including children, preventing foreign terrorist fighters from crossing their borders, disrupting and preventing financial support to foreign terrorist fighters, and developing and implementing prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration strategies for returning foreign terrorist fighters. Ito po yung definition ng foreign terrorist, individuals who travel to a state other than their states of residence or nationality for the purpose of the perpetration, planning, or preparation of or participation in terrorist acts or the providing or receiving terrorist training, including in connection with armed conflict and resolving to address this threat. Yun po yung definition
Yes.
ng doon sa resolution.
So, is the sponsor open to Filipinizing the definition by stating that a foreign terrorist is not a Filipino?
Inada po natin sa dito sa mismong yung definition ng United
Yes,
Nations.
nakita ko nga
Yeah.
it is the international.
Eksakto.
But in the context of a Philippine law, when we define a foreign terrorist, we should add that that person who is not a Filipino, comma, etc., etc.
Well,
That makes him a foreign terrorist. Otherwise, if he's a Filipino, can he be a foreign terrorist?
as I said, we just adopted the definition under the UN resolution that I stated earlier, Mr. President. And clearly, it's stated here, yun, nag-travel sa isang state other than their states of residence or nationality for the purpose of, no? Kung ang purpose niya in traveling is to perpetrate, plan, or prepare for or participate in terrorist acts, etc., etc., Mr. President.
And then I noticed that in the definition for of foreign terrorist under
I think the operative phrase here is other than their states of residence or nationality, Mr. President. So kung Filipino national siya, he may not fall under the category of a foreign terrorist, Mr.
yes,
President.
yes, he should not fall under.
Yes.
Actually, so we can make that categorically clear, Mr. President.
This falls under Section 3, sa definition ng foreign
Yes,
terrorist.
let us see. Okay. And then definition under letter D, Mr. President, inciting to commit terrorist acts.
Still under Section 10, Mr. President, or
Section 3, sir.
Section 3.
In the definition of terms, letter D. Does the effort have to be credible or convincing for it to fall under
Letter
inciting to
D.
commit terrorist acts?
yeah, inciting to commit terrorist act, Mr. President?
Yes, sir. Page 3, letter D. If a person, let us say, goads
Yeah, goads.
another individual to commit any of the crimes punishable under the act by, let's say, by verbal,
Verbal,
means,
written,
by
or
verbal
visual.
means. But do we need to assess whether the person is credible or convincing enough, or a mere mention of inviting another person to commit terrorist act? Is that already inciting?
I don't think credibility should be a major factor in determining if he, because being convincing would mean that he was able to convince. Medyo palayo na po tayo siguro. We're always bound by the intent and purpose of that individual in committing that particular act. Para hindi po tayo maligaw, Mr. President. Kasi pagka hindi naman pumapasok doon sa intent or yung purpose of that individual in goading or provoking, instigating, persuading another individual, hindi po papasok yun dito. But as long as the intent and purpose ay klaro,
So,
it doesn't matter if he's convincing enough because para medyo subjective yata yung pag-determine kung convincing o hindi.
so in this new Anti-Terrorism Act, we will always look at the intent and purpose of the perpetrator, of the accused, Mr. President.
That is correct, Mr. President.
So that is now, yeah, but if we have a problem with things being subjective, isn't looking at the intent and purpose also subjective, because those two items, those two things reside in the mind of the perpetrator? How can we penetrate the mind of the perpetrator?
Mr. President, it is so provided sa under Section 4. After enumerating the acts, because we have already removed the predicate crimes, for a better definition, in-specify na po natin dito A2E. Pero meron po ritong succeeding paragraph, when the purpose of such act by its nature and context is to intimidate, put in fear, force, or induce the government or any international organization or the public to do so, government, international organization, saka yung public. No? Ito po yung ina-address dito. Tapos, meron po ritong to do or to abstain from doing any act or seriously destabilize or destroy the fundamental political, economic, and social structures of the country, to or create a public emergency or undermine public safety, shall be guilty. Andyan po yan, andyan yung boundaries, yung parameters.
So we will derive the purpose by looking at the nature of what was done and then the effect, the context, the implication. Yun po ba yan?
Opo.
So titignan natin.
Kasi sa Revised Penal Code, nandyan din yun sa inciting eh. Inciting to war, Article 118, Article 138, inciting a rebellion or insurrection, 142, inciting to sedition. Ito po, in-specify na natin yung paragraph na na-mention nyo about incitement.
Since andyan na po tayo sa section 4, meron po kasi napansin dito na as far as purposes of the terrorist act is concerned, am I correct in my understanding that there are 4 possible purposes? To intimidate yung isa, etc., seriously destabilize yung isa, create public emergency yung pangatlo, and then undermine public safety yung pang-apat? Yun po ba yan? Basta any one of the 4, right? Any
Yes,
one of
Mr.
these
President.
4, pag present siya, then that is your purpose. And then
Yes.
we looked at your acts, that is, basta the acts should
Any
fall.
of those
Any of the 4.
Yes.
My problem is, yung 4th kasi, to undermine, if the purpose of the act, by its nature and context, is to undermine public safety, and then all of the acts enumerated before that paragraph are attacks, weapons, explosives, dangerous substances. So, hindi po ba catch-all na yun? Whatever you do, you undermine public safety. Pasok ka na sa definition ng terrorism.
Well, yun ang consequence, yun ang resultant factor. Pero pag tinignan natin sa purpose of such act, no, any of those acts, andyan yung to intimidate, put in fear, force, or induce the government.
Yes, sir, but they don't have to be, the act must not fulfill all the 4 purposes. Any one of the 4 purposes is enough. Tama po ba yun?
Tama po yun, kasi or yung nakalagay dito.
Kaya nga po. So, but all of the acts before that paragraph can be said to undermine public safety. So, pasok na parate. If there is an attack that caused death.
Hindi po all the acts, any of the acts.
Yes. But I'm referring to paragraph A.
Undermine
Paragraph A
public safety.
before that paragraph says attacks that cause death or endangers a person's life. That undermines public safety. Then letter B, attacks that cause extensive damage, destruction. That undermines public safety. Now, number 3, you have weapons, explosives, biological, chemical weapons. That undermines public safety.
Yes,
And then
pero
the fourth,
ang limitation po nito, nandun sa unahan ng paragraph. No? When the purpose of such act, by its nature and context, is to intimidate, put in fear, hindi naman ito as if stand-alone yung undermining public safety. Meron pa rin qualification.
But Mr. President, as I understand it, actually, you can skip the 3 other purposes if the purpose of undermining public safety can be derived from the context, then terrorism has occurred. Kasi not all purposes must be achieved. Tama po ba yan? Anyone, yes.
Mr. President.
And in my reading of the measure, undermining public safety is one independent purpose.
That is correct,
That's
Mr.
correct,
President.
yes. So that's then
When the purpose is to undermine public safety, and it's precipitated by any of the
yes, the
acts as enumerated, papasok po yun.
yeah, but it will the acts enumerated before that paragraph
Any of those
are
acts.
always involve public safety. So in the context, we can always use the fourth purpose. Parati ka wala ka nang
Parang
lusot
catch
sa,
all,
wala
catch
kang
all
lusot
phrase.
sa terrorism.
Or create a public emergency or undermine public safety. Yes, you are correct, Mr.
Separate,
President.
in my reading, Mr. President, separate pa rin yun.
In the
Or
alternative,
is that
yeah.
one? Is it, yeah, creating a public emergency is one purpose.
Yes.
Undermining public safety is another purpose. So
yeah, another.
there are actually four purposes. So, if the sponsor is willing to revisit because this is the heart and soul of the new measure.
The definition.
Which overhauls the, otherwise kung wala ito, we will stay with the Human Security Act, di ba? But this is the heart and soul of the new measure, and this is a penal law. We have to be precise and very clear about what acts are we punishing. And then another issue, Mr. President, the same section, immediately after mentioning the penalty for committing a terrorist act, there is a proviso that the definition of terrorist acts shall not cover legitimate exercises of rights, freedom of expression.
That is correct, Mr. President.
Why was there a need, Mr. President, to immediately qualify? So is there a danger? Is there a close relationship
danger.
between exercise of basic rights and some acts which can be mistaken for as terrorist acts?
Well, as pointed out by the Honorable lady from Panay during her interpellations, yung legitimate exercise ay merong labor strike. And the laborers nagkaroon ng violence. So hindi sila mako-cover dito, Mr. President. Kasi legitimate exercise of freedom of expression or nag-express sila ng dissent. Kung i-cover pa rin natin sila, ay medyo lalong
Yes.
maging wayward, Mr. President.
Tama nga po yun na hindi talaga sila covered. Pero nag-alala lang ako na immediately after defining terrorist acts, we have to clarify that the exercise of fundamental rights will not be covered. So, meron palang danger na mapagkamalan ang exercise of basic rights as a terrorist act. Kasi sinunod gagad natin in the
For clarity, Mr. President, for emphasis,
so
para lang malinaw na this one of the safeguards Kasi if you do not include that proviso, I'm sure you'll be interpolating along that line. Bakit
kulang?
Bakit kulang? So that's why we deemed it wise na i-qualify na lang natin na hindi kasama yung legitimate exercise of the freedom of expression, etc., etc.
So, in the legitimate exercise of a right, can there be an attack? Can there
Yes.
be?
No, pwede
because
erupt.
attacks, manufacture, possession of weapons,
Hindi po
etc.
yun.
Diba?
Yung consequence, pwedeng yung legitimate exercise of the freedom of expression, etc., etc., might result in some violence that could result in destruction of properties or loss of lives. Hindi po mako-cover yon. And that's the reason why we included that proviso, that qualification. Para lang malinaw, Mr. President.
In that scenario where there is a legitimate exercise of fundamental rights, who made the attack?
Well, those expressing dissent or in the exercise of their freedom of expression, kung mag-result, regardless of who initiated,
So, okay,
that could be initiated by their act of expressing their freedom of dissent, of expression, na nag-result sa violence, then they should not be covered under the definition of a terrorist act, Mr. President. Because, again, babalik na naman tayo sa intent and purpose.
definitely. Hindi niya, ang intent niya is legitimate expression of legitimate exercise of fundamental rights. Okay, so we just made it doubly clear.
For clarity,
yeah,
Mr. President.
Mr. President. Okay, so have we, Mr. President, have we addressed the paragraph E of Section 4 about the threats? Tatanggalin na po ba natin yung threats?
Threat to commit
Yes, sir.
any of the acts listed in paragraphs
Yes,
A to D?
A to D.
Hindi po.
Hindi po, ilalagay iyan.
Andyan po rin.
Kasi po ako so
Yung attempt po.
because paragraph C mentions research into and development of biological and chemical weapons. So a threat to research will be punishable if we will not refine the language, Mr. President.
Again, as suggested by Senator Drilon, yung attempt, inalis po natin doon sa succeeding paragraphs na attempt or conspiracy. We're removing or deleting the word attempt.
On Section 6. But, well, I'm just pointing that out, Mr. President, that maybe we should take a second look, because if we read paragraph E with paragraph C, then a threat to research, masyado na pumayatang malayo na yun sa terrorism.
Threat to research?
Because paragraph C punishes as well as research into the development of biological and chemical weapons. That's in paragraph C. And if we read it with paragraph E, a threat to commit any of the acts listed in paragraphs, including paragraph C,
Even the attempt to research.
the threat
will be
pala sa
punishable.
threat, hindi pa attempt, no,
Threat to
Oh.
research.
May nagsabi, I will research into... So, I mean, the word, because this is a penal provision, that's why we are concerned about the
I
wording,
understand where
Your
you're
Honor,
coming
Mr.
from.
President.
I understand where you're
Otherwise-
coming from, Mr. President.
Because here, kaya kanina sinabi ko, to the credit of the Human Security Act, wala namang wrongfully sigurong na-detain. Ayaw naman natin na this will be now be the black mark or record of this new measure na marami namang na apektuhan sa wide net na cast niya. So Mr. President,
We can craft a language to further clarify
Yes, sir.
this,
Yes, sir.
Mr.
If
President.
ever. How about attacks? Is that a clear concept? Attack? Don't we need to define what an attack is?
An attack is an attack, Mr. President.
but that's why.
I
When I-
really
when I
cannot
raised-
think of any more.
What is an attack, sir?
Well, if I attack you now, that's an attack, Mr. President.
How did it amount to an attack? Because there's a physical contact.
Yeah, that's one form of attack, Mr. President.
So
Yeah.
because there's another kind of attack. Paragraph A is a person-to-person attack. Paragraph B is an attack on facilities or...
Pero kinwalify na natin to, Mr. President, eh. Attacks that cause death or serious bodily injury, attacks that cause extensive damage or destruction to a government, and so forth and so on.
Because actually, when I raised this with my staff, we were also divided. Some said that attack is clear, but so for me, I think I need to define what an attack is, Mr. President. Mr. President.
Anyway, that's the purpose of this discussion, of this interpellation.
Yes.
And we're open to
Yes, we will.
any suggestion, any amendment later on to further clarify or enhance or make this law more applicable and effective, Mr. President.
Tignan mo section. For example, Mr. President, since we are now defining terms, if I go back to Section 3, definition of terms, don't you think, Mr. Sponsor, that we need to define international organization, which is mentioned in Section 4? Importante din po yun kasi one purpose is to intimidate or force the government or any international organization.
Well, if
Do
you
we need to define?
if you would like to
Yes,
further
is that
clarify what
okay?
an international organization is, then we're open to that,
Yes,
Mr.
sir, thank
President.
you. And then, Section 26 mentions supranational jurisdiction. Is a sponsor open to also inserting a definition of what is a
Yes,
supranational
Mr. President.
jurisdiction? And then Section 45 mentions extraordinary rendition.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
any term, any phrase that may be deemed vague or not clear, we're open to
Yes, sir.
further clarification, Mr. President.
Another phrase not clear to me but which may be clear to your honor is extraordinary rendition found in Section 45. Yan po ba yung practice na ibang bansa po, no? Wala naman tayong ganyan yata na. So, is your honor open to also defining
Yes, Mr. President.
extraordinary rendition? And then actually talking about extraordinary rendition, Section 45, we notice that the remedy,
45.
I think there's really no need to mention extraordinary rendition
41
because
pala.
we do not need to resort to that, especially if we have a mutual legal assistance treaty with the requesting state, Mr. President. Because in our mutual legal assistance treaties, one common provision there or feature there is a person detained by Philippine authorities may be sent to the requesting state to testify in a case where they need that
Yes,
person.
Mr.
And then
President.
ibabalik din po siya sa atin. So I don't think we need to I do not think we need to resort to the concept of allowing extraordinary rendition.
Covertly nakalagay dito, yung extraordinary rendition.
Ano nakita mo? Cyber? Wala ang kopya.
Yan. My understanding of extraordinary rendition, Mr. President, is covertly sending a foreign criminal or terrorist suspect to be interrogated in another country with less rigorous regulations on for the humane treatment of prisoners. Yun po yung understanding ko. Kaya nilagyan natin ng ban.
Covertly. Kaya nga, ban.
Covertly.
Pero may
Yes.
unless kasi tayo eh.
Where's that?
Merong exception. At sabi, ang point ko, Mr. President, sa mutual legal assistance treaties, pwede na yun. We don't need to siguro link it, connect it with extraordinary rendition.
Unless his or her testimony.
Yes, sir. Yan. Unless.
Yeah, we're open
Yes,
to.
sir. Yes, sir. And then, in the definition, sir, paragraph E on page 3, there is this phrase,
What section is that, Mr. President?
section 3, sir, nasa page 3 po, paragraph E. There is this phrase,
Section 3.
expert advice. Kasi material support yun, di ba? Which is, if a person extends material support to a terrorist, that person is punished also. So, right?
That is correct,
So
Mr. President.
the phrase material support is being explained or defined. There is this phrase expert advice. Eh, natakot lang po ako sa mga panyera. Baka is legal
Hindi
advice?
po.
Is legal advice?
No, of course not, Mr. President. Even an advice coming from a doctor should not be covered. It should be in relation to perpetrating an act of terrorism, Mr. President.
Okay. Because meron kasi sa dulo, sir, except eh. So, baka except medicine or religious material. So,
So, lagyan na natin ng legal.
baka po kasi.
Sige po, Mr.
Sige
President.
po. And then, we are also, this is a new section, Mr. President, the proposal to commit terrorist acts.
Where is that section? What section is that, Mr. President?
Section 7, sir.
7. Okay, proposal to commit terrorist act.
This is a new section, so a new idea.
Yes, Mr. President. we want to be proactive before a terrorist act occurs, Mr. President, because we are considering the tremendous impact on the destruction of lives and properties, and even on humanity, Mr. President. This is a crime against humanity. That's why
Okay, so
we
ang
are proposing to include proposal to commit terrorist act as a punishable act, Mr. President.
my worry, Mr. President, is the evidence, how to prove this. The charge can easily be made, and it might be a word versus word scenario.
Not necessarily, because it depends on the circumstances, Mr. President. Remember, you know this as a lawyer, hindi naman pwedeng standalone yung isang ebidensya. It must be corroborated by other pieces of evidence, no? Circumstantial or direct, even testimonial, Mr. President. As long as there are pieces of evidence supportive of each other or one another, then it's up to the judge to determine, Mr. President.
But anyway, the penalty is bailable.
Yeah,
The
8
penalty
years.
is 8 years. Okay,
And
so
1 day to 12 years.
but baka dyan tayo
Kung
magkaroon,
masusunod, Mr. President, dapat hindi bailable ito.
baka dito tayo magkaroon ng clogging of our dockets sa
Proposal?
sa proposal kasi ang dali pong mag-charge, hirap i-prove, pero bahala na kote. Baka ganun yung maging attitude at ano.
We're always bound by evidence, the rule of evidence, Mr. President. So,
Yeah, yes, the accused will eventually be acquitted, but in the meantime, there will be a case. That's my worry. Hindi, maybe 8 years. Bailable.
hindi naman po ito novel, ano, sa RPC. Meron din tayong conspiracy and proposal to commit coup d'etat, ano, rebellion or insurrection. So, hindi naman
For
po
chosen,
ito.
yeah. For chosen crimes, we punish proposal and then conspiracy. Yeah, and terrorism is at that level, no?
Even the higher level, Mr. President.
as grave as those crimes where we punish conspiracy and proposal.
Yes.
And another new concept is inciting, Mr. President, inciting to commit terrorist acts.
Yes, we discussed this earlier, Mr.
Yes.
President.
How different is this from proposal?
Inciting is, by its definition, even under the revised penal code, magkaiba naman po yung proposal at saka yung inciting.
Ang proposal po ba may specific mayroon na siyang specific na kinukonvince? Si inciting ba is parang ano pa? Just
Yeah, that may be...
shotgun appeal?
Ang proposal po, pwedeng nasa planning na eh. Di ba?
Yun na nga.
You're proposing to commit a terrorist act. Then, yung inciting, ito yung ang audience dito, hindi specific person.
Yes.
Pagka
yun na.
inciting.
Oo.
Di ba pa? Parang you're addressing your communication to the general public.
Pero sa inciting, sir, the conduct causes a danger of such acts being actually committed. So yun yung sinabi ko kanina, yung credibility of the person. So ito, you will only be charged with inciting if the prosecutor believes that your call is going to be actually committed. And dito po.
Not necessarily,
Yun pa
Mr.
ba yun?
President.
Ito.
Mr.
So-
President, if we make that as a requirement, that the one inciting to commit a terrorist act should be able to convince the public at large, no, or goad or
To do it.
to do it,
Yes.
parang medyo
Ah.
mahintay na kailan makomit pa yung terrorism? We want to be proactive nga, Mr. President.
So, can we revisit this phrase where, unless I am misappreciating its meaning, there may phrase po sa Section 8, where such conduct causes a danger of such acts being actually committed. Di ba yun ang ibig sabihin? Such acts, ang ibig sabihin nun, terrorist acts po, di ba?
Terrorist, yeah,
Oh,
Mr. President. Such
So incorporated siya. Incorporated into inciting to commit terrorist acts is the credibility of the, ano bang tawag siya? Inciter? Of the person inciting. Because there is now a danger of such terrorist acts being actually committed. So, which is not in the earlier section on definition of inciting, Section 3.
In this case, Mr. President, I think the clear and present danger rule should apply. And we have jurisprudence in this regard, Mr. President.
No, but it's just the phrase, Mr. President, that I want.
We can-
Maybe we can revisit that because if that is not the intention, but it is there, better review why it is there.
Yes, Mr. President.
And then another new concept, Mr. President, Section 9, recruitment to and membership in a terrorist organization. Is this new? I believe so, it's new.
Wala pa na 7, 9. Recruitment. Yes, this is a new concept, Mr. President.
There is a phrase here, Mr. President. The organization or association of group of persons is organized for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts. Meron po yan kasi either the person is recruited to support any terrorist act or individual or any organization, association of group of persons. Doon lang po ako sa pangatlo nakafocus, which is proscribed under Section
Yes.
24, klaro po yon, or declared by the United Nations Security Council as a terrorist organization. Okay po yon. But meron ding association organized for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts. How will we know, sir? How will we know that an organization is organized for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts? Kasi life imprisonment din po ito.
Yeah. Not necessarily prescribed, di ba? Yeah, not necessarily prescribed.
Correct. So
by-
not necessarily prescribed. So walang court pronouncement that this is a terrorist organization. So our justification in charging a recruiter is that you're recruiting someone into an organization organized for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts. Paano kaya ma-prove yan, sir? Baka masyadong mahirap.
Matter of evidence yan, Mr. President.
Yeah, but pwede ring makwit si accused.
A
and then-
terrorist organization which is not yet proscribed. Because yung prescription, although nilimit na natin sa 6 months, but there is a period within which that terrorist organization may not be formally proscribed or judicially proscribed. So we included that for that purpose or for that reason, Mr. President.
So we will lose now, don't we lose the value of prescribing? Because there will be no need to prescribe.
No, not
what-
really, Mr. President. Even if it is not prescribed, but if it is a terrorist organization that is capable of committing terrorist acts, and that's the reason why we included that. And function na ng evidence yan, Mr. President. Not necessarily at the level of the court, but matter of evidence as far as law enforcement or prosecution, Mr. President.
Yeah, because they can always allege that this group has been organized for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts. you're recruiting someone to join that group, we will charge you with the recruitment.
Penalty to. Penalty.
You may be ultimately, you ultimately may be acquitted, but then in the meantime, may kaso. Kasi my concern is how do we prove? But then, Mr. President, if there's an organization organized for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts, don't we already have an existing conspiracy?
As I said, it's a matter of evidence, Mr. President.
No, ang point ko, sir, is kahit tanggalin ito, hindi ba sa conspiracy na siya papasok? Kasi another crime na naman, may crime kasi na conspiracy in another section, may crime naman dito na membership in a terrorist organization or recruitment. So, hindi ba...
Ang conspiracy, more on the planning stage ito, Mr. President. No?
Kasi sir, when the organization is
Recruitment
organized for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts, di ba conspiracy na po yun?
No, we're talking here of an organization, terrorist organization.
Na nagsama-sama sila to...
No, Mr. President, conspiracy may involve, di ba, at least two persons, two or more. This section 9, pertains to an organization.
Pwede
And
bang-
if you are recruiting somebody to join that organization, regardless of whether it is already proscribed or not, then you may be committing a crime. But again, we'll be guided by the rule of evidence in this regard.
Well, kung defense counsel ka, tatanungin mo na lang sa fiscal, why did you not have this organization proscribed? If you already know that the organization was organized for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts.
Yeah,
That's my only concern.
Yeah, what you're saying, Mr.
Mr.
President, once it is established as a terrorist organization, may conspiracy na. That's your point, Mr. President?
My point is, parang this is too loose a ground to charge somebody for recruiting a person into an organization, and the allegation is that organization
It's a terrorist
is
organization.
for the purpose of engaging in terrorist acts. Wala naman yan sa articles nila, definitely. So, yung proscribe, okay na yun. Nag-hearing na korte nun at alam na this is a terrorist organization. But this one...
Not yet prescribed.
So, ang daming pwedeng i-charge under that ground. Ultimately, they may be acquitted, but the point is may kaso na because the allegation is your group is organized for terrorist activities. Paano nalaman yun?
Not just an accusation or allegation, Mr. President. There should be enough evidence to show that that organization is a terrorist organization, but not yet proscribed.
Yes,
And
yes.
if you are recruiting somebody to join that terrorist organization, regardless of whether or not na-proscribe na, then you may be committing an act under this proposed measure, Mr. President.
But the logical subsequent acts of the DOJ must be to proscribe that organization. Have that proscribed.
Eventually, Mr. President.
Dapat ganun, sir. Kasi otherwise, sa trial, i-depensa na kagad ng defense attorney niya. Then, how come, what steps have you taken to proscribe this organization as a terrorist organization? Kung wala, therefore, sasabihin ng defense attorney sa prosecution, you yourselves are in doubt on whether or not this organization was organized for terroristic activities.
As I said, Mr. President, one major amendment that we are introducing or new concept is to be proactive because a terrorist act is a terrorist act. As much as possible, we want to prevent it from being committed. So yun
Yes,
po
sir.
yung underlying reason kung bakit we want to be proactive in several provisions.
Yes, sir. When we look at the structure of the measure we are considering, huli na nga lahat eh. Di ba? Huli lahat. What will happen to attempt, Mr. President? Are we deleting attempt?
We are
That attempts-
removing that, Mr.
That attempts. So, huli na lahat proposal, inciting, conspiracy, recruitment, membership, ano pa ba? Even if you're outside. So,
Tama
I
po
think,
yun.
yes, nakita ko po yun. That the intention is really to deter.
To prevent,
To
to
deter,
deter,
to
yeah,
deter
Mr. President.
by making everyone understand that
Kasi a
What-
terrorist
what-
act
what-
that has caused tremendous damage, lives and properties, cannot be undone, Mr. President. And it has already succeeded in putting in fear, intimidating the government or any international organization which you propose to be
defined,
more
yeah.
finely defined. Then that is the purpose of this measure, Mr. President.
Yes, we join in the effort, Mr. President, to streamline, make clear the concept of terrorism, and make all acts connected with terrorism punishable in the Philippines, in solidarity with the rest of the world. I think that is what is happening in
Yes,
the rest
Mr.
of the world.
President.
My only worry is that, even if we have a section to penalize abuse of the law enforcer, for as long as the abuse cannot be proven, the law enforcer may not be punished, and yet the aggrieved person spent X number of days under detention. Talking about detention, because I've read in some countries, for example, hindi ko nabanggitin yung bansa, mayroon isa, a person in a country spent 1,000 days in jail without any charges. Siguro, presumably, sa anti-terrorism law nila yon. What is the longest possible detention
Reglementary period,
period of an accused
unaccused,
in a terrorist act without charges?
without charges, under the proposed measure, 14 days.
14 days na lang po.
Non-extendable, Mr. President. In other countries, Malaysia, 59, Indonesia, 21, Singapore, 2 years, renewable pa for an unlimited period, Pakistan, 30 days, etc., etc.
Ayun nga. So at least hindi natin kinopya yung iba, yung mga draconian measures. Hindi naman po natin kinopya.
The law enforcement agencies, those that we invited, ang gusto po nila 90 days.
So why did we end up with 14? Is it 14
14.
calendar days, 14 working days?
Working days, Mr. President.
What kind of days, sir? Calendar days, working days?
Working days.
Working days. So just 14, policy na lang yun, policy 14.
Yes, Mr. President.
But is it automatic, sir, that every time we detain, we will extend it
No,
to 14?
Mr. President, may mga qualifications. Kung yung necessity
Ayun,
of
that's it.
detaining them for a maximum period of 14 working days, kailangan ma-approve pa yon.
Working. So kung sa Christmas, yes sir, kung sa Christmas period ito, mahaba po yung 14 working days. Ayan.
Well, Mr. President, when I was still with law enforcement, medyo sinasadya namin yan pagka kailangan namin, hinuhuli namin ng Sabado na umaga. Because, Mr. President, during the committee hearings, we asked our law enforcement agencies, those who acted, ano ba yung reasonable time for you to be able to gather enough evidence to successfully, at least, magkaroon ng,
Hindi, working.
makakomply sila doon sa inquest proceedings, of course, na reasonable yung time. And they came up with yung 40 days should be enough. Although some of them, they were suggesting or proposing a 90-day reglementary period.
Basta klaro po, Mr. President, na hindi ibig sabihin nun, if you're
Hindi
arrested,
automatic.
if you're, sundin pa rin yung nasa revised penal code na siguro since this is a grave crime, 72 hours ba yan? 72, yan yata ang pinaka,
Ito po yung mga grounds,
hours,
For-
72 hours. I think.
Grounds for the 14 working day period of preventive detention. Number one, it must be established that, number one, the further detention of the person or persons is necessary to preserve evidence related to the terrorist act or complete the investigation. Number two, the further detention of the person or persons is necessary to prevent the commission of another terrorist act. Three, that the investigation is being conducted properly. May mga qualifications pa.
Kaya nga sir, I noticed that word further eh. So ibig sabihin nga, the further detention will only extend up to a maximum of 14. So what is the original detention period?
36.
As a general rule.
36 hours.
36 hours.
Yun yung nasa...
Revised Penal Code.
Revised
We
Penal
follow the
Code.
Revised Penal Code. Okay.
Tapos meron pa pong safeguards yan, no? Law enforcer taking custody shall notify in writing the judge nearest the place of arrest of the following. Ito pa po, lalagyan pa ng time, date, manner of arrest, location or locations of the detained suspects, physical and mental condition of the detained suspects. Tapos, mandated pa to report in writing yung Anti-Terrorism Council. There are safeguards available, Mr. President.
So, as I've stated earlier, I really noticed the structure of the measure. Talagang walang kalusot, no? Walang lusot. Talagang lahat. And then pati yung stages of pati yung ano tawag doon?
Any stage of execution.
Not only that, but the level of criminal participation from principal, accomplice, accessory, lahat po.
Yes.
May problema ko lang po is for an accomplice, for example, found in Section 8, page 12 of the report, since we have also another concept, may bago rin tayong concept, Section 5 eh.
Accomplice.
Section 5, di ba sir? Planning, training, preparing, and facilitating the commission of a terrorist act. Hindi ba are the concepts overlapping? Because an accomplice is someone who by previous or simultaneous acts cooperated in the execution of the terrorist act. Yun po yung, that's the revised penal code definition. We just applied it to the terrorist acts. And
Yes,
yet
we made reference to Article 17 of the Revised
Yes, sir.
Penal Code. No?
But our measure introduces a new crime, Section 5, the planning, training, preparing, and facilitating the commission of a terrorist act. So, didn't the accomplice, through simultaneous acts, facilitate the commission of terrorism? Hence, sa Section 5 siya habulin, which is life imprisonment.
Without the benefit of
Yeah,
parole,
that's the
Mr.
life
President.
imprisonment. That's the maximum penalty. Si accomplish 17 years, 4 months, and 1 day to 20 years. Maybe this is the revised penal code adjustment.
Yes,
one
Mr.
degree
President.
lower ba? Under the-
17 years, 4 months, and 1 day to 20 years.
So yun po yun. So since we are covering all bases, ang daming acts na punishable, stages punishable, criminal liability. Baka sir na may nag-overlapping eh. But that the accomplished simultaneous act can be part of facilitating Section 5, an independent
Yes.
crime.
But if you're an accomplice, no, and you have participated under Section 5, then that won't
Yeah.
qualify you as an accomplice.
O kasi Section 5 naman sir.
Ang Section 5 po is preparatory yun eh. Ang conspiracy is yung, conspiracy,
Yeah.
being an accomplice, do sa execution na yun, Mr. President.
Section 5 kasi if you participated in the facilitation in the commission of a terrorist act, life.
That is
Section
correct,
5.
Mr. President.
But
Kasi part of the planning eh. Pag accomplish, ibang stage na po yon. Wala na yung sa
Are these all-
preparatory.
Is Section 5 and po ba yan? You must have participated in the planning and
Preparatory.
training and preparation.
That is correct,
and-
Mr. President. Accomplish, ang understanding ko is, ang stage niyan, execution eh.
Okay. Because I have the same problem pagdating sa accessory. Accessory is someone who conceals or destroys the body of the crime or the effects or instruments thereof. Sabi, di ba, accessory
After the
po
fact.
siya.
Yeah.
But balik na naman ako sa Section 5, if you are possessing objects connected in the commission of a terrorist act, then you're Section 5. You're not an accessory. You are principal sa Section 5.
Hindi naman independent. Mr. President, let's read again Section 5, planning, training, preparing, and facilitating the commission of a terrorist act. It shall be unlawful for any person to participate in the planning, training, preparation, and facilitation in the commission of terrorist act possessing objects
Ken.
connected to the commission of a terrorist act or collecting or making documents likely to facilitate.
So this another independent po yung
Yeah, independent.
possessing object
because
is
it says here
yes.
or.
So an instrument of the crime or effects
Mere
may be-
possession.
Apo,
Connected in the commission of a terrorist act.
right. So paano yun? Principal ka doon, life yon. But si accessory who does it by concealing the effects or instruments of the crime is an accessory, but principal siya sa kabila, sa 5, as far as my understanding is concerned.
Pero magkaiba yung context, Mr. President. No? As I mentioned earlier, Section 5 refers to preparatory. No? Kaya papasok bali sa principal. Yung accessory is after the commission.
So the possession of the objects connected in the commission of a terrorist act
Kinonsil mo?
was before the
Before.
commission.
Yes. To
Okay,
facilitate
so
the commission of the
Section
terrorist
5
act.
ka. Section 5, principal life
Yes,
ka.
Mr. President.
But if it's after, inabot lang sa'yo for you to,
Tinago mo.
okay. So, that's the normal definition of the accessory. So, maybe, sir, we will just have, if we can clarify, because,
Case in point, example, Mr. President, hindi ka naman kasama sa planning. Hindi ka naman nag-facilitate. Na-commit ngayon yung terrorist act. Nilapitan ka nga ni terrorist. Sinabi sa'yo, pakitago mo nga itong explosives kasi baka ma-disgrasya ako rito.
Correct.
And he conceals it. Then, accessory ang labas niya.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Doon lang ako balik sa accomplice na may simultaneous act si accomplice. Previous pa. Si accomplice kasi yata is by previous or simultaneous act. So, the accomplice can really be mistaken for a principal in Section 5.
Previous or simultaneous, Mr. President.
Yes. So that's the danger, sir, that the accomplice may be mixed with the principals in Section 5. But anyway, we'll try.
Anyway, Mr. President, I'm very
examine-
appreciative of your
Yes.
effort because we're also aiming at a near perfect, if not a perfect legislation in this regard. Because I consider this an important piece of legislation. And your interventions, the sponsor really appreciate your intervention. No matter how tedious
Sir,
and how detailed.
this measure already qualifies under the walang kamatayan category. So it's an honor, sir, to have sponsored a walang kamatayan bill. You know? But sir, ito na last na lang siguro. Siguro sa amendment na lang, sir, if we can
Yes.
we can qualify our
Yeah.
amendments with
Further
some
clarificatory.
explanation. But one in the accessory, we are deleting the standard paragraph for accessory found in the revised penal code na although you did all of these things except profiting from the crime, if you are a close relative of the criminal, you cannot be an accessory. Dinilit natin. So that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that a close relative
Kasama pa
to-
rin yun, Mr. President.
Yeah, a close relative now who harbors or assists in the escape of the principal of, which is, if I remember correctly, in the revised penal code for other crimes, no, you are not an accessory because you're a close relative. Here, you will be an accessory for terrorism. Kasi dinilit natin, sir. Nakadelete yung ano. Yes, di ba? Is that the intention?
That is correct. We deleted that
Yes,
portion.
so are we not going against human nature, Mr. President? So
Well,
we might
you
be...
can say that, Mr. President, but this is a, this is a crime that we should all abhor, Mr. President.
But the accessory never participated. Yun ang assumption dun eh. Na wala nga siyang alam beforehand eh. Nalaman na lang niya after. But profiting, siyempre, ano talaga, punishable yun. But the human nature or instinct to help
protecting
your
your
close relative, are we going against that? And then we will now be charging a lot more people for being accessory to terrorism.
Well,
Kasi human nature nga, sir.
To respond to that, Mr. President, yung ordinary crime, it's a crime against person or persons. No? Pero we're talking here of a crime against humanity. So I'd like to think that this is a special case. And to harbor a terrorist, no, terrorist fighter, maski kamag-anak mo, medyo mahirap din, Mr.
Pero close
President.
naman, sir. It must be a really, really close relative. Not only, yun na yung rule. Because, is there any other crime where we also change the rule on accessory?
Nobel.
Only for this one, di ba?
Yeah,
Oh,
this is
so,
novel.
kaya nga, this
novel.
is a new feature of the measure. So, maybe,
How about in other countries? Meron bang? Hindi, other countries. In other countries.
well,
We can discuss this
yes,
further,
yes,
Mr.
sir. We will
President.
just,
I just asked my staff
take a
kung
look.
in other jurisdictions, kung merong ganong provision. And as of now, wala. So this being introduced
For the
only
first time,
under this
yes.
proposed measure. So we can talk about
Anyway,
it.
this is a policy question, so
Yes.
no right or wrong answer. Is we are establishing a new policy as far as
Yes,
terrorism is concerned.
Agree,
so.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, I would like to thank the good sponsor for his patience.
And I'll thank you more, Mr.
Thank you,
President. I thank you more for all your...
Marami pa sana, sir, pero ano na lang.
No, I'm open. I'm still open, you know.
Okay.
Anything that will really make this measure really, as I said, if not perfect, near perfect, then I'm all for it.
Ako naman, I'm only after a workable law
Yes.
where the batting average for conviction is high or respectable batting average.
We're overhauling the Human Security Act kasi dead letter law, Mr. President. Na, yan talagang walang silbi.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, distinguished gentleman from Cagayan de Oro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we still have a few interpellators. One of them is Senator Gordon and a few others. But to allow them some more time to study, we can take this up once again tomorrow, Mr. President. I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1083.
Any objection? Hearing none, 1083's consideration is suspended. Would you like suspension first?
May I ask for 1 minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended. tayo. Okay. Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, our distinguished colleague, the sponsor of the second item on our agenda, Senator Coco Pimentel, will be tackling the bamboo industry development measure tomorrow after consulting the stakeholders now on particular provisions that we discussed together with our minority floor leader. Therefore, we have we suspended, Mr. President, Senate Bill 1083? We suspended it already? Okay, just, I'm getting senior moments. With that, Mr. President, we have, no more. With that, Mr. President, no other items to take up. We'd just like to remind our interpellators of Senator Lacson's measure, Senate Bill 1083, to interpolate tomorrow. Senator Gordon and some further clarificatory questions of our minority floor leader, I believe, are in order. And I'm not sure about Kiko. Is Kiko going to ask? Ah, okay, so Kiko also. So with that, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday, January 29, 2020.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, January 29, 2020.